one of the big shadows that I find of group spaces is when they become these isolated bubbles that are blocking out the outside world and becoming separate islands. And so I really love this conversation for how relevant it is right now to keep bringing the outside world in, that we're not separate or that we're not isolating ourselves. And so one of my questions for you in that, you've already spoken to multiple things, but I'm curious for people who are facilitators and leaders, what the new growing responsibility for us is in this changing time of the world.
Wow, what a great question. What is the new responsibility that we have? I think what comes to me are a few things. One is the responsibility to clean this vessel as much as we can. So to really do our inner work as deeply, as powerfully, as strongly as we can, which means I know more about myself. I know about my trauma, and I do the work I can to integrate that. I know about my shadows, and I do what I can to mitigate those. I know about my bias. I know about my favoritism. I know about my orientation in groups. I know about the kind of people that trigger me, and I take responsibility for that. I do as much as I can to clean this vessel, so I come as open as I can, which means I also want to be a gardener of space. I want to create enough spaciousness within me. I'm going to be limited in how much group I can hold, dependent on how wide this vessel can be. And the trauma-sized spaces in this, the places where I have a knot or a contraction, I can't host that in a group either, because there's no resonance for me. There's just a kind of tightness there. So I want to polish this. I want to clean this as much as I can, and then I can host more and more and more and more and more. So I feel like the capacity to host more, I think, is really important. And I think that's a responsibility to notice that and not to play safe, but equally not to be, I think this is also important responsibility in a way, to also know the limit of one's competence. So not to feel like, oh, I need to be able to do everything. I need to host, this hot racism conflict, or I need to host, this workshop about colonialism. Yeah, maybe it's too much, and to notice, this I can do, and this I can't do right now. This I want to develop more competence in. So I think also having the humility to say, no, this is too much for me, or this I need to do with somebody else, or this I need to do in a team where I can learn from people who are more experienced than me. So I think having an accurate sense of one's own competence, capacity, limits, orientation in the field, that's a responsibility also.
Beautiful. So it sounds like the first step is self-awareness.
Yeah. Self-awareness, and then deep, deep listening. Listening to the field, listening to what I call the higher organizing principle that's orchestrating what's happening in the field, like a deep listening, a suspending of knowing. So I become more curious about what's happening than a sense of I know what's happening. That's a very different orientation to a group space, as you know.
Yeah.
And I become kind of curious and lean in, oh, this is interesting, rather than suspend the part of me that wants to know or fix something or save somebody or have a certain group experience. I think we want to cultivate the capacity to be with what is and allow steps to emerge, rather than have concepts of what a group ought to be like and what this movement ought to be like in the group. So I don't know if they're quite responsibilities or practices. I think they're very related. Your question was about what's the responsibility that we have as facilitators. But I think they're all in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. A growing awareness of self and outside other relationship world, and hosting and holding more of that, whilst simultaneously clearing out the debris that gets in the way.
Yeah, or integrating it. I would say integrating what. It's interesting also how we talk about it. When we talk about something being in the way and I want to get rid of it, I think we're already, I'm not saying this is your practice, but how we talk about it is also a clue to kind of how we orientate towards it. So if we make anything wrong or something that needs to be got rid of, we're going to probably contract against it and try to kind of, I don't want this part, like this is not part of me. But actually, if we say, yes, this is part of me, how do I integrate that? And integration usually means paying subtle, close attention to it. So feeling it in my body, feeling the movement in my heart, bringing a very gentle kind of loving awareness to those sensations. That's the beginning of integration. And when I do it with somebody else who's also feeling me as I'm feeling these difficult parts, these trauma parts, let's say, or the unintegrated history in me, that gives me more of a resonant field, which helps me digest my experience more. So I think we want to become kind of composters in a way of our experience, because out of the compost grows beautiful fruits, right?
Yeah. I love compost. It's one of my biggest.
Exactly. Isn't it a great, it's such a great thing. You take your shit and it turns into something glorious. I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, it's one of my favorite practices.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
There's something it's still sitting in my awareness. I think I'm not complete with it. So I want to circle back a little bit, which is around, there's both this piece that you brought in around polarization, and there's also another piece that I have, which is like trying to create more bridges. And I'm so curious for in either the groups that you're leading or in the work that you've been doing online, because as soon as you bring these big topics into the space, the polarization is like, it just skyrockets. And it's, again, one of those things I'm also witnessing everywhere, even not in the big themes that we're facing right now, even like small little, topics that feel so much less dire. So I'm curious what practices or ways you've found to build bridges between the polarized sides right now that are so inflamed.
Yeah, this is, again, such a great question. I think the first thing is to slow down. Slow everything right down and start to notice, invite people to notice, like, what is actually happening inside me. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great late Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, he used to do a practice. He used to bring together, this is in the 1970s, he used to bring together, let's say, Palestinians and Israelis, right? And he'd bring them together for peace work for 3 weeks. And in the first week, the groups wouldn't meet at all. He said, the first thing you need to do is get to know yourself. Right. So they would spend time telling each other their own stories. How is it to be a Palestinian at the moment? How is it to be an Israeli, a Jew at the moment? And they would talk with themselves to get to know themselves first. And that's in a way the essence of slowing down. When the polarization happens, it's not about them. It's about, the first point is what's happening in me. I feel afraid. I feel my ancestors are in the space. I feel terror, I feel anger, I feel sadness, I feel like what's happening inside me. So we want to, I think, create the spaces where we slow down enough to notice this. So there's a parallel with what Thich Nhat Hanh was doing. We said for a week, you're just going to get to know yourselves. Then in the second week, he would have kind of witnessing dialogues. No real interaction, but people would listen to each other. So now we know ourselves. We're maybe in a place where we can listen a little more attentively to the other. So the Palestinians would listen to the Jewish Israelis speaking their experience, and the Israelis would listen to the Palestinians speaking their experience. And there's a deeper understanding that starts to emerge. And then in the third week, they would actually do some work together. They would create a project together. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that trajectory, whether it's week by week or moment by moment in a way. I think the first thing is to slow down enough to feel myself. Notice what's happening in the body, noticing what thoughts you're having, notice what your feeling state is, slowing it down, which also means knowing what resources you. A walk in nature, journaling, meditation, looking at a flower, whatever, like what supports you to regulate deep breathing practices, what supports you to regulate your nervous system so that you can move from an activated nervous system, which is doing this, to something that's a bit calmer, where maybe there's the beginning of firstly feeling yourself a little more fully, and maybe even after that you can start to feel the other side. So there's a lot of kind of slowing down and starting to sense oneself more fully before we can start to say, yeah, but how do I understand you better? I can't understand you better if I can't even feel myself, if I'm just totally activated. I'm just going to spend time dealing with my activation. And when people feel existentially threatened, our nervous systems are such that we cannot feel the other.
Exactly.
We can't feel them because we're so busy just looking after my threat to life. I can't feel you in that place. So that wants to be respected. It doesn't want to be made wrong. Like, well, why can't you understand what's happening in Gaza? Yeah, because if I also feel existentially threatened, I can't actually. I need to regulate this enough that I don't feel so much the threat that I feel I can integrate to some degree. Then I have the chance to feel something beyond myself. But to expect Ukrainians to feel what's happening in Russia or Russian, we have to acknowledge where people are and the degree of threat. I think we don't really appreciate from the privileged position that you and I sit in. And I learn constantly from these calls, like how threatened people feel on a very existential level. And that has to be respected and acknowledged. And then so how can I support you to be? And once you have a sense of your own being, maybe there's a space to build bridges and other things. But we can't expect that too soon. It's not possible. We have a practice in the field that I'm part of, Thomas Hübl's field. He's my teacher. He's a contemporary mystic, which we call global social witnessing. And I feel it's a fantastic kind of offering into the space. Global social witnessing means that when I become aware of issues in the world, I read the news, for example, first we do this as a collective practice. So there are many global social witnessing calls online, but I start to notice the limit of what I can host. Hosting means I have a felt energetic connection to the news. Often we get news and I either register it here and it kind of goes, oh, that's terrible. And I go on with my day, or I just don't want to look at it at all. Or I really feel it and I become totally overwhelmed. Like I just can't handle this. My feelings are so intense. And somewhere we want to practice, I think, developing a stronger, deeper capacity to host more, which means I have a felt energetic relationship to it. William Ury, who's one of the kind of world great mediators and negotiators, he talks about building the third side. So when there's a conflict, witnessing is a collective third side. And when the eyes of the world are energetically on an event, it has an impact. It's like a subtle form of intervention. So witnessing is very different from being a bystander. Sometimes we see the world news and we become bystanders. That's not so helpful. But witnessing means I have an energetic relationship to it. I feel it as much as I can. It's not about pressure. It's not saying you ought to feel more or it's bad to go numb. No, numbness is also an intelligent response to overwhelm. But can I just kind of soften my heart and feel a little bit more what I'm noticing in the world? And for me, that's the practice at the moment. To not go numb, also not to become overwhelmed, to respect the places where both of those movements happen, not to make them wrong, to notice those and say, yeah, and can I also sit and just be present to something and feel it? And my felt relationship to it is an intervention. So it moves me from a state of powerlessness, no, there's nothing I can do about it, to a sense of agency because I have a felt relationship to what I'm witnessing.
What if the nervous system doesn't ever get to that place of regulation in that space? Like, what if you actually don't reach that?
Yeah, then you live in a constantly kind of traumatized state, like that when your nervous system is doing this. And I think that is a reality for many people, which is why they generate all sorts of, sleeplessness and different habits and addictions and other things to try to find a way to integrate that. I mean, what we can do is provide more and more spaces and opportunities for people to co-regulate. So regulating on your own is difficult, but for sure there are practices to support that. Co-regulation is easier. Like if I sit with you and you're in an activated system and my system is spacious and calm, that has an impact on your system. Mm-hmm. We start to co-regulate, and this presence is kind of viral. This presence starts to spread itself as a facilitator in a room. If you're present and and safe and available and spacious, that resonates, then that sends an energy, it emanates an energy into the space that everybody else will feel. So the more, again, it comes back to like what is the responsibility that I have for this, because this vessel is what will have the impact. Not what I say so much, not all the brilliant tricks I have as a facilitator, but this beingness is what will have the impact on other people. And so we can just keep providing those spaces and those opportunities. And for sure, there's lots of people doing, trauma-informed work and basic kind of trauma first aid, if you like, little cards saying, here's some things you can do when you're activated, breathe like this, look at nature, find a friend, have a hug, all these things.
Yeah. And particularly when you're holding or in a space where we're doing the work to bridge this theme of polarization, and you start with resourcing, self-resourcing, in order to take the next step, there would need to be some collective sense that this group could take that step. And I'm just curious about that threshold and making the decision to take that step, or if there's actually all we can do today is come together and resource. There isn't the capacity to continue on.
Right. And I think two things come to me. One is, what is the intention of the group? So intention is the conductor in a way. Intention brings the higher organizing principle of the group into the space. So we want to clarify, what is the intention? Is the intention to build bridges? Is the intention to be a self-support group? Like, what is the intention of the group? And then I think part of the job of the facilitator is to be able to sense exactly what you're talking about. We're actually not resourced enough now to kind of open up to presencing the conflict. We're still needing to build the vessel, build the container, build the safety, build the resourcing, build the connection here. We're not quite ready for that. I ran a collective trauma, we call it collective trauma facilitation. Well, I was part of a collective trauma facilitation training, and the second year of that was running a lab. We call them international labs to look at different aspects of collective trauma. So I ran one on what I called the collective trauma of being Jewish, persecution and perpetration. So we wanted to look at both these aspects, not just like anti-Semitism, but also what's the perpetrator energy in the Jewish community also, which is strong in my experience. So we had 3 of us holding the space, 2 actual trauma therapists. I'm more like a trauma-informed practitioner. I have quite a lot of trauma training now, but 2 people who are like super qualified as trauma therapists, and me, who's more coming from a facilitation background. And then the 3 of us kind of held this space for a year. So we kind of journeyed with a group of about 35 people, consistent group, for a year. And we needed to constantly be sensing what is the next movement that arises in the group space now. And we spent time resourcing, and then we would open a space for kind of people to presence aspects of persecution, for example, that they experience. And then we're sensing, how does the group field absorb that or not absorb that? How much can be held and integrated? How much is overwhelmed? And it's a fine art and a dance, and it needs training, that this nervous system can also tune into the collective nervous system of the group and know what is appropriate. It's not so much a kind of cognitive, shall we on Tuesday do this? It's more, so what do we sense? And that's why it's good to have like 2 or 3 of you, so that you share your sensing, because of course everybody's sensing might be slightly off or skewed or comes through our own filters. We're none of us sensing what is actually happening. We're sensing through our own filters. So the more we can kind of have a team of us kind of sensing together, then we maybe come to a sense, together we feel like this is the next movement. But it's a constant dance of structure and emergence. So we have a structure and an intention, and then you have to see what's emerging. And what was clear, we had 12 sessions in this year, for example. We had intended at the beginning, insofar as there was a plan, there wasn't really much of a plan, but there was a bit of structure. We thought we'll spend, about half the time looking at experiences of persecution and half the time looking at experiences of perpetration. We couldn't do that. We spent, because the persecution experience was so strong. Also, people were calling in from Israel, and people have history in the Holocaust, and the persecution experience was so strong that it took us to about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through before we could really open the door to say, yes, now we have presenced the Jewish experience of anti-Semitism, of the Holocaust, of thousands of years of persecution. Now we've presenced and integrated that to some degree. Of course, just a tiny portion, but we've digested a little piece of that. Now we can turn our attention to perpetration. But it took a long time before we were ready to do that and say, and we also do this, and we are also doing this, and we are also doing that, because so many people weren't ready for that earlier. So it's a constant sensing.
Wow, thank you for this. I want to kind of deepen into this topic now that we're here around trauma and ancestry, because I think it's also one of your brilliant, bigger pieces. So I'm curious around in the fields that you're in, how you're working with ancestral and collective trauma.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to notice that it's there, right? We work with what we call IAC, individual, ancestral, and collective trauma fields. So we want to acknowledge that it's present. We bring our own individual experiences, maybe of attachment trauma or of shock trauma. We are bathed in an ancestral line, which carries both trauma and resilience, places where we've been victims and places where we've persecuted, and also places where we have also built a lot of resilience in the line. And we are in collective trauma fields constantly, of patriarchy, of racism, of colonialism, of COVID, of slavery, of many, many things that are constantly impacting us. So I think the first thing that I start to, again, it depends what the intention is and what the contract is with the person or with the group or with the team. But at some point, it usually becomes relevant to at least mention that this may not just be your personal experience. If I'm coaching somebody, sometimes it'll become very clear to me that when someone's speaking about something, it's not just their personal experience. This is the collective experience of women, or this is the collective experience of the Indian subcontinent that's kind of present in this space. So we sometimes sense that this is part of a much bigger movement. So I think the first thing is to notice that it's there. Firstly, we have to notice my relationship to those things. How am I with these topics? Because how am I with racism? How am I with patriarchy? How am I with slavery? How am I, as a British person, with colonialism? So I need to, again, continually do my inner work to feel like, yeah, I can also acknowledge my perpetration energy. I can also acknowledge my unearned privilege. I can also acknowledge my bias. I can acknowledge those things as much as I can and be on a constant learning curve around those things also. So that's part of my responsibility, is to do that. And to notice how they live in me, and notice what fears come up in me when I start to touch them in a group space, for example. And then to gently bring the awarenesses into groups. And then, depending on the nature of the contract, as I say, with the individual or with the group, there may be permission to go deeper. If people say we want to learn more about like a trauma-informed approach to leadership or a trauma-informed approach to coaching, what would that look like? Then there's kind of deeper layers of both teaching and awareness and practices that support that.
I'm curious for an example, maybe, or an experience, either personally from you or someone else, around how an unintegrated trauma pattern would show up in your facilitation, and then how you would work with that, or what you would do with that.
I mean, two things come to me. One is around where I might have a lack of awareness around my own privilege/perpetration energy. So that's a kind of unintegrated trauma that I don't acknowledge. So I was coaching somebody recently, for example, very nice Italian guy who's now kind of heading a big kind of European group within a very global organization, right? So part of his job, he said, I've got this, I have to sort out all these conflicts, right? Conflicts between Azerbaijan and Armenian places and conflicts between Israel and Palestine, because they have kind of centers in all these spaces, Serbia and Bosnia, like different places which are in conflict. So, and he said, and I started to do this, and I started to kind of facilitate this meeting, and then people got very angry with me. You're another kind of white Westerner telling us what to do. And he was kind of shocked, because he hadn't really come across his own white privilege, right? And he just felt like, I'm a nice person trying to kind of bring some kind of harmony to these conflicts, right? So he was very unaware of where he was also going to be both dreamed up as and actually embodying, in a way, some of the colonial energy that was exactly the issues that people were working on. And so in the coaching session, we talk about that. And I talked to him about white privilege, and I gave him some resources. And so you want to read this book and you want to study these things, and maybe you want to form a little study circle and kind of learn together about white privilege, which will enable you to come into those spaces in future from a different vantage point in yourself, because you will know yourself better. You will be able to anticipate what's coming to you in a different way. You will, in a way, welcome what comes to you, because it's necessary to receive that from people who have been victims of colonialism. But he was very well intentioned, but wholly unprepared for the field that he was entering into in that space. And so then we want to support that good intention to be more firmly grounded in wisdom and humility. And he's a lovely man, and he's like, I absolutely want to learn all this. I'm shocked at how little I know about this. And we're all on a learning curve around this. I also witnessed, actually, my teacher, this was amazing to me, my teacher and somebody else, I don't need to go into the names of it, but they were running a major training for about 200 people on becoming trauma-informed coaches and consultants, right? So they open up the first module, it's in person, it's a week long, with references about all the kind of giants on whose shoulders they are resting, right? And his colleague kind of brings all these names into the space and videos and clips, but they're all white, right? Just unconscious in that moment. These are brilliant teachers, but they're all white. About 20% of the participants are people of color. And immediately there's like, how can you do this? Right? There's a lot of, this is like unearned, unconscious privilege in the space, saying, here's all the great teachers that we're going to learn from. Yeah, right. Big mistake, let's say, lack of awareness. Let's put it like that. What was beautiful to me is that they received it. They received it fully. They did a lot of thinking. And at the beginning of the next module, they came with, it almost moves me to tears when I remember it, such a deep, sincere, heartfelt apology for their lack of awareness. They said, we absolutely understand this was a completely unintended, unconscious privilege that we were bringing, unconscious of how this was going to be perceived and basically wrong. We made a big mistake here. And they did such a beautiful apology. And of course, then also changed structures and brought in different people and changed the facilitation team. And, they did a lot of structural change also, that it really landed. And it settled something in the group, because it's not like we can't make mistakes. We will all make mistakes. But then to have the humility to say, yeah, we made a big mistake here and we are deeply sorry. And as facilitators, we need to be willing to do that and say, yeah, I screwed up here. Yeah. I made a mistake here. I was not conscious of this here. And I am very sorry. And I am learning. And also accept apology might not be received. That's also possible. People may still be angry. That's also part of what we have to work with. Yeah.
What I love about these moments is that they're almost like corrective experiences for all of us who didn't receive and still who don't receive those moments of leadership, being willing to repair and take responsibility. And the imprint that then gives is almost worth more than whatever we were supposed to be doing together to begin with.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. And the place for heartfelt apology is really important. And it's interesting. I'm remembering as we're talking, Moses Maimonides, one of the great kind of Jewish scholars, he had a kind of 5-step process around apology. It's like when you've made it, I probably won't remember all of them now, but one is definitely acknowledging what I've done. The second step is stop doing that. The third step is acknowledge the impact this has had on other people. The fourth step is actually the apology. And the fifth step is vowing to never do the same thing in the same situation again. And it's somehow very profound to kind of feel like, when I issue an apology, am I really doing all those things? Am I acknowledging fully, not with no excuse? Yes, I did this. It's not, yes, I did this. I will stop doing this immediately. All those steps, I think they're super, but I recognize the harm that this has caused, Now I apologize, and I will not do the same again. It's a very beautiful process, I think.
It gives a direction towards repair, where people, in that moment, you can just feel so overwhelmed by what just happened, and now I fucked it up, and how do I make it better? I think it's great to have these relational frames that we can just lean into, especially in those heated moments. I took a training with you last year, and it's coming up again this year, which you lead, called Emergent Leadership. And I'm imagining, everything you've been talking about, it's so big and so profound and so important. And maybe we can bring it down a little bit more into group facilitation. And there's so many pieces, but maybe you can just start by introducing everyone to what emergent leadership is through your context.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So, I run this training, as you know, you were part of it last year, called Emergent Leadership. It's a 4-module training. It's online, runs September to April. And I subtitled it A Training in Applied Mysticism. So that was me coming out of the closet. So I feel for about 30 years I've been kind of doing that, but calling it something else. We're moving from head to heart, or we're looking at relationship building skills, or we're looking at whatever. And I think, no, what it actually is trying to bring a contemporary embodied mysticism into life and leadership. Contemporary. So it's not that these are kind of mystical teachings from thousands of years ago that don't get updated. They're constantly being updated. So what's a contemporary mysticism? And an embodied mysticism, which means it's something that I feel, body, heart, mind, not just a lot of words here. Yeah, we're all one, and I'm God and you're God. Yeah, but what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything unless I live it, unless I feel it in my body or in my heart. So I'm interested in a contemporary embodied mysticism. And that's in a way the strand that runs through all the modules. It's about how do we sense what's emerging, what's coming down the line, what the whispers of the future are subtly and slowly and quietly calling us to. Like, how do we create that? And what are other ways that we orientate to the future, which we think is the future but isn't? So when we think about the future, we're often recycling the past into tomorrow and calling it the future, but it's not really the future. The future is fresh. The future is creativity. The future is inspiration. The future is surprising ourselves with the words that are coming out of our mouth because we haven't planned them. So how do we bring all that into group spaces so we can facilitate a field which is coherent? And when the field is coherent, which in my experience is a combination of deep presence and shared intention, and appropriate vulnerability, like those things create a coherent field. And when the field is coherent, the higher organizing principle can be felt more clearly in the space. And that's when we have kind of magic and aha moments and insights and relationships unblock and all sorts of extraordinary things happen. So that's what we explore, how to do that and how to be that in the 4th module. So that's the kind of arc of the training.
Wow, beautiful. You said something that I just want to, it's probably only relevant to me, but you said appropriate vulnerability. And I was so curious about the use of the word appropriate.
Appropriate.
Tell me, what does that mean?
We might call it conscious vulnerability. There's something around not just bleeding into the space. there's a place to say, oh, but I feel vulnerable and I'm going to share all my emotions with everybody and it's just going to spill out everywhere and it takes up a huge amount of time and space and it's not really serving the group field much. But I think we want to kind of invite, because I think it's also part of the intention setting. We want to invite, let's say, conscious vulnerability. Thank you for picking up on the word appropriate. Helps me kind of deepen what I mean by that. So I think what I mean more is a conscious vulnerability that says, yeah, this I show now. This is important for me to share. I feel very vulnerable in the space, but it's what's happening and it's true for me. And it feels like I want to bring that consciously into the group space. But that's different from just saying, well, everybody should be vulnerable as much as they like and share whatever they want to in whatever place. It needs to be boundaried and held and with intentionality, I would say.
Yeah, beautiful. One of the analogies I give for this, because it's one of the questions I get a lot, since one of my things happens to be vulnerable leadership, somehow that ended up being a thing for me. And people are always asking, like, when is it appropriate to do that? And one of the analogies I give is it's like, there are times when people share their vulnerability and it's like their vulnerability is their baby and they're asking you to hold it, or even demanding sometimes, like, someone else hold this. It's too much for me. I can't hold it. And for me, what appropriate, or in this case, conscious vulnerability would be is like, I'm holding that little baby. I'm holding that little one and my adult is here and I can hold that and be present enough to hold it and not need or be unconsciously leaking for someone else to hold my vulnerability for me because I'm here and I fully have that.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that. And at the same time, I invite you to feel me in that space.
Yes. Be with me in that.
Be with me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Be with me. Be a companion to me in that. It's mine. But when you feel it with me, it helps me hold it also.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's very different from saying, take it from me.
Take it. Yeah. And I think that's the wound that some people have of being in a space where the leader or the facilitator is leaking their vulnerability and they're not holding the space anymore because now they're asking the space to hold them. And that's where people have like this icky feeling of that didn't really feel that good. I didn't like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's exactly right. Like we want to, as facilitators, we don't want to be invulnerable. We also want to say, yeah, we have our strengths and our weaknesses and our fears, but I don't expect you to caretake me in that place.
Bingo.
It's not appropriate. You're paying for me to facilitate your process. You're not meant to take care of me. But part of my gift is to say, I also have my fallibility and my fears and my weaknesses, let's say, or my challenges, my areas of growth and development.
Yeah.
Let's not even call them weaknesses. They're just areas where I'm growing.
Yeah. So let's come back now to emergent leadership, to just give a little bit more space to speak into the element of mysticism and connecting how mysticism and what mysticism has to do with leadership, basically.
So what I mean by that is mysticism has many definitions. And what I'm talking about when I'm talking about mysticism is tapping into something beyond our five senses that brings us to a place of higher truth. So there is, in my cosmology, there is a kind of absolute truth, let's say, that's known somewhere, the divine plan that I'm not part of, or that I'm not aware of. I'm definitely part of it, but I'm not aware of it. There is an absolute truth, but we live in a world of relative truth. So I live in a world where I feel like I see the world as best I can see it, but I accept there's many things that I don't see. But mysticism brings me into a place of approximating to the higher relative truth that I can inhabit. So I want to grow into sensing, feeling more, understanding more, knowing more, while at the same time bowing down to all that I don't know and that I don't see and that has not been revealed to me. But it's that kind of a movement. So that's part of mysticism, is tapping into something beyond my five senses that is higher, deeper, wiser than my five senses give me access to. It also is a source of energy. And a lot of the work that you and I both do is energy work, essentially. It's like energy fields that we're creating and part of and bringing and blocks to energy. So mysticism helps me understand sources of energy, sources of inspiration, sources of creativity, so I can cultivate those more, and therefore will also show up The more light comes in, the more shadow is also illuminated. So part of the mystical journey is also illuminating the dark spaces, the shadow spaces, the traumatized spaces that come up for healing. That's part of the mystical journey also. And I think another element of mysticism is around embracing paradox. So we often become quite binary. It's another form of polarization, if you like. And we think either it's this or it's this. Either there's structure or there's emergence. Either we're urgent or we're slow. Either we're whatever. We're often kind of in binary places. And I think mysticism helps us be in a both and. It helps us kind of hold paradoxes. Paradoxes are only paradoxes at a certain level of consciousness. So at a higher level of consciousness, we can hold both. So all those things, I think, are aspects of mysticism. And to me, in a way, it just updates leadership. So I think the world is kind of hungry for something beyond the leadership models that we know. There are many different sorts of leadership, inspirational leadership, transformational leadership, generative leadership, ethical leadership. We have all these kind of leadership manuals and books, and we have had for decades. And it's not quite what the world needs at the moment. And I'm noticing that it's striking a chord with quite a lot of people, because I can also feel the places where people are saying, yes, these existing leadership paradigms are not sufficient to meet the complexity and the challenge and the multifaceted nature of the problems that we face and the opportunities that we have. We need something more than we have already generated. So that's why I'm bringing what I call a contemporary embodied mysticism to life. I call it life and leadership. And in a way, the two core elements of it, I just hatched a training I'm going to run in person in Findhorn next May. It's called deepening agency and orientation. Because I think at the heart of it all, it helps us do that. It helps us gain orientation into the world. Why is the world as it is? Not that we will be able to explain it, but we may have a deeper understanding, because the fields that create the world as it is today are deep and wide and historic and many, many different fields that create the world. So it gives us a sense maybe of orientation and agency. And what is my part to play in the orchestra of life? And really that's in a way, like, it's the heart of the training, but I think it's the heart of mysticism in a way, is also saying, what is my note to sound? What is the instrument that I'm meant to play? Because if I know that, and I play that part fully and courageously and boldly, while listening to the symphony of all the other parts that everybody else is playing, that's a thing of beauty. And that will also mean that I die satisfied, that I have played my part. I'm not meant to save the world. I'm not meant to solve climate change or loss of biodiversity or bring an end to polarization and war, but I can play my part. And I think there's a lot of kind of, I would say, over responsibility in people feeling like, I have to do more, I have to do more, I have to do more. But that's very unsettling. And I think mysticism can also give us a place of feeling like, I need to know what is my part to play, and then have the courage to play that fully. And then I can, as I say, like, in a way, die satisfied. I've made my contribution.
Oh, so beautiful. What a big unmet need or experience for so many people, I think, who have the passion and the motivation, but they are not oriented and they don't know what their piece is. So that's gold. That feels really on point. A question of curiosity. Your training is a leadership training, and yet you're also teaching facilitation. And I have this fun question I always love to ask, which is, are all leaders facilitators, and are all facilitators leaders? And I'm curious about, I put the two together myself, but I'm curious for you to unpack that a little bit. Do you see them as, inherently connected?
Yes. Short answer is yes. I think a good leader is a facilitator. A good leader is an enabler of groups and of individuals also. You can facilitate an individual as well. I think a good leader facilitates movement in accordance with kind of what's wanting to happen. So that's a facilitative movement that I think leaders would be attuned to. And facilitation is an act of leadership also. I mean, we want to kind of unpack what we mean by leadership, and I'm not so keen really on kind of quaint definitions, because I think leadership is a movement. It's not a position, and it's not a thing. It's a movement. But leadership helps us move in the direction that life wants to move in. So leadership serves life. And a good leader will also be serving life. So they come together in that. And a facilitator also serves life. It serves the movement of life. There is a natural movement. There's an original movement. There's a natural movement, an evolutionary movement that is wanting to happen in an individual, in a group, in an organization. And I think a good leader and an attuned leader and an attuned facilitator are in tune with that movement, and they help to conduct it. And they meet it. Like Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, the master shapes events as they come. Right? It's a beautiful phrase. Like the master shapes events as they say. Something is coming, and like thy will, we might say, thy will is coming, and I meet it. The master shapes events. So I bring my will with thy will, and that becomes an intention and a direction. And that's a beautiful thing, to know where we're a bit too willful. It's just what I want. Where we're also just sitting back saying, tell me what needs to happen. No, we need both. The master shapes events as they come. It then says she steps out of the way and lets the Tao, lets the way speak for itself. She steps out of the way and lets the Tao speak for itself, which means I take that to mean I let my ego put it in the back seat. I step out of the way and let the movement carry me. Let life, let the Tao carry me. Let the Tao speak for itself. And I think that's the art of leadership. I think that's the art of facilitation also. It's the art of being a human being.
So beautifully said. I love this. Thank you. And I love just merging the two together. They do feel inherently connected to me, although can be separate, but I'm not sure what a great leader is that can't also facilitate. I think we're coming to a closing now. It feels so full. And yeah, I guess just as like a closing question, if you were to offer an invitation to facilitators listening to this, what might it be? What might your closing call or invitation be?
It's so interesting you say that, because as we were closing that, I thought, oh, this is something I want to share. There's this lovely place in the Bible. As I say, I come from a Jewish background, so I know the Old Testament a bit better. But there's a place, and I don't know that very well, actually, but there's a place where God speaks to Abraham at some point, he speaks to Moses at some point, he speaks to the prophets at different times. And he basically asks them to serve. He asks for a volunteer, he says, I need somebody. And the response in Hebrew is to say, Hineni. Hineni means, I'm here and I'm available. And each of these sages offers this response, Hineni, I'm here and I'm available. They don't know what the journey is going to be. They don't know what the task is that God is asking them to perform. But the willingness to be here and available, that's what a facilitator needs to say. You go into the group space and Hineni, I'm here and I'm available. And whatever the journey is, I stay here and I stay available.